Hello, and welcome to the Alliance Wealth Advisors podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cadaro. As advisors, we get to have fascinating conversations with interesting people every day. It is those conversations that inspire this podcast, where we interview business owners, high-performing individuals, and industry leaders to better understand how they made important decisions in their lives. By exploring these inflection points, we hope it helps others think through decisions in their own lives while giving a glimpse into the types of conversations we have with clients. While our role as advisors may mean different things to different people, the goal remains constant. We help people think through where they are in their lives and how to get where they want to go. For episode 10, we sat down with entrepreneur John Basalyga. John is the president of Eastern Roofing Systems and JBAS Realty, a commercial real estate development and management company. During this conversation, John tells his personal story, how his career has evolved over the years, and why he is so passionate about improving Scranton and the entire region through his work. We also look ahead and discuss some of the projects he and his team are working on. John explains the principles he operates by and talks about the experiences that have shaped him into who he is today. While he may own a roofing company, he believes strongly in the importance of putting yourself and others in a position where there is no ceiling to the potential upside if you work hard. Maybe most importantly, he explains how he believes that having confidence in yourself must be the foundation from which everything else follows. John tells a couple stories about how believing in himself in critical moments helped him take leaps in his career that no one else thought was possible. We also discuss why he avoids negative people at all costs and why it is essential not to let others' opinions distract you from listening to your own instincts. Finally, John talks about why at the end of the day, we need to be willing to act with purpose. While you can plan and do as much analysis as you want before moving forward, without the courage to act, you cannot accomplish anything meaningful. Whether it's financial planning, starting a business, or any other undertaking in life, the most important step is the first one, getting started. Thanks so much to John for sitting down with us, and we hope you enjoy this episode. Okay, so John Basalyga, welcome to the Alliance Wealth Advisors podcast. I appreciate you being here this morning. I know it's probably not in the top 5 of things you want to do to start your day, so I appreciate you coming and stopping by to talk to us today.
No, I appreciate it, Mike, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you. I think it's important to get a clear message out to the people of our area and some of my plans moving forward. I have a lot of hope for the area.
Great. So you had actually said, just to coincidentally, when we were chatting here to get started, you have a ribbon cutting today, and I think that's sort of a good example of everything you have going on. Many of these projects, a lot of people probably don't even know about. So tell us about that ribbon cutting just to get started, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So the ribbon cutting is today at 5:00 at the marketplace at Steamtown. Dime Bank actually moved into the building where MBT Bank used to be. As sad as it was to see MBT leave, we were happy to fall right up with Dime Bank. Dime Bank is really coming on strong and has a good presence in the area, and their commitment to the downtown is huge for me. I think it's great. So happy to have them.
The way that, in Alliance is downtown, and it has been interesting for me sort of starting there in 2020, watching as it's sort of coming back to life, coming out of the last 2 years. And so seeing this activity is certainly, a good thing for everyone who's down there and sort of put their flag in the ground. So before we get into any more projects, all the things you're doing, I think, to get started, telling our listeners about John Basalyga, the person, and sort of how you came up, and what your background is, I think is a good place to get started.
Yeah, sure, Mike. I was fortunate enough to have really good parents, really strict parents, and as I always say, my parents forfeited being the popular parents for the right parents. My father was very, very tough as a father. I wanted discipline. taught us good values, morals, taught us to always stay humble and dedication to hard work and doing things right. So at a young age, I was working. I had a lawn care company. I was doing about, not even a company, but I had about 8 to 10 customers. I used to go around with my grandfather and cut grass. And he was probably started around 8 years old. So I did that through the years. When I was probably 11 or 12, I had my first job up in Moscow at a greenhouse. I used to go plant stuff and cut grass, do lawn care, just things like that. As we went through the ages, my father had businesses up in Sugarman's, and when Sugarman's went bankrupt, his businesses went down as well. He had music in the book.
Wow.
And, times got a little tough for us. So we ended up moving from Dunmore. We moved up to Moscow. And, I ended up moving next to a guy who just started a roofing company. I was 13 years old, and I was out in my yard doing some work, trying to make the yard a little bit nicer and stuff like that. And my neighbor, who just started a roofing company, like I said, had noticed me working hard. And he told my mother, he said, would he ever be interested in, coming to work for me and weekends, summers, stuff like that. And my mother actually agreed. And I talked to my parents, and I had to leave my other job. And my father said, just don't leave him hanging. So I ended up working for this roofing contractor. And I loved it. And what I loved the most about it was the teamwork and, getting on a project, getting it started and seeing it through the end and just having that feeling of accomplishment. I really enjoyed it.
How old are you at that point?
13 years old.
Oh, wow. So you're up on the roof early.
Yeah. And actually in the beginning, I wasn't on a roof, and that's what bothered me the most, because I was the ground guy, and guys would be ripping off roofs, throwing shingles down, and I was cleaning up, and I was quite embarrassed of it. I wanted to be a guy that was actually installing and had a true purpose. So I worked really hard to learn the trade as fast as I could. So I wasn't the guy running around grabbing tools and cleaning up garbage and grabbing coffees. I just didn't like that.
Right.
So kind of as quick as I could, I wanted to learn, and I ended up loving it. And I went through high school doing that. I got to be foreman of the job, and it was just all about production and things like that. I was keeping track of the payroll, keeping track of the jobs, and I was bringing jobs in way under bid hours and stuff like that. And the workmanship was impeccable. I looked at all those different things, but one thing I found out as a leader on that, I was able to get guys to work hard and push them hard and keep them really happy as well. It's a very fine line. You get the best yield out of people without them walking off and giving up and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so
finding that balance.
It totally.
That's really interesting, because my assumption is if you're not the youngest, you're among the youngest on these crews. So talk about that. How did you think about that at an early age? Because that's not an easy skill set to have when sort of you're the youngest guy in the room, in the roofing businesses particularly.
Yeah, certainly challenging. You get looked down upon, and limits are set for you by other people because of your age. And I never liked that. At one time, my employer even said, I needed a little bit more money and stuff like that. And it's like, you do really good for a 17 or 18-year-old. And I always say in my life, I never want to have a ceiling over me. I even tell some of my employees now, you come work for us and you do good and you do a great job. Don't ever think you'll be stuck at a certain salary. There's ways to move beyond that and get that. And it gives people hope and incentivizes them. But nobody wants to be trapped. I didn't want to be trapped at that age. And part of that was a lot of my decision to move on. What actually happened when I got out of high school, and in high school, I did really well. I was in an advanced placement. I was in an accelerated program since 6th grade on the honor program. My father was a professor at Columbia. I'd assisted. I graduated from University of Pennsylvania. I could have did anything. I often make a joke, if my neighbor happened to be a heart surgeon, I might have been a heart surgeon today. It just happened he was a roofing contractor. But in life, I don't believe in coincidences. I think everything happens for a reason. And I never aspired to be a roofer my whole life or anything like that. I love it. I respect the men that do that. It's very, very hard work. But it was a gateway to many other things. And after I went to college for a year, I decided after a conversation with one of my professors, kind of tell me what I had to do in life. I basically looked at him and I said, why didn't you do it? I said, I don't think I want to be stuck at some level in some institution and things like that. So I decided, I'm going to go with my heart and go with my gut instinct, which I rely on a lot in my life. And I moved forward. I actually went back to the guy I was working for. And after a little bit of time, my uncle, who had a construction company out in New York, had asked me if I wanted to come out and work with him a little bit. And at that time, my parents had split up. My mother is from New York. She moved back there. I have 4 sisters. They moved out there. So I was kind of here with my father. And I decided, let me give it a shot. I never know what's going to happen. So I went out, and he said he had a general contracting business. And I went out and worked for him. He said, I'm going to get you in a trailer. You could run a job. And I told him, I said, I don't want to start in a trailer. I want to start on the bottom, because I believe, and even to this day, that's the best way to get the respect out of the men.
Yep.
You know, just start, you're somebody's nephew and you got handed a position. I don't like that. I went down and I worked with the guys, and I remember doing a project one day, and we were the GC. So we'd hire different subs, electrical, mechanical, and even in this case, a roofing sub. And it started raining. I remember I was inside a building in White Plains, New York. I was demoing some hallways, some plaster and stuff like that. And water started pouring in the building. And I quickly ran up, I ran up through the penthouse, and I go on the roof, and I just started flashing drains. You know, it's like golf. The drain is where all the water goes. It's like, that's where the ball goes. So you start at the drain, and you try to get the problem under control as quick as possible. And I just went up there, and I was like, you know what? I missed this. And even when I was out there, I told my uncle, he'll laugh about this, but I said, his name was Ant. They said, Uncle Tony, I said, I think we should start a roofing company. I didn't have any money. I couldn't do anything. And he's like, I like to sleep at night when it rains. And he just kind of made a joke out of it. So I was doing a little bit of side work out there, but all the while I kept in contact with the guy I worked for, and we were really good friends. And, I decided to come back, and I worked for him a little bit more. And then, it just, when something's meant to happen, it's meant to happen. I just wanted to be on my own. So at really hard decision at 20 years old, I left him and I started Eastern Roofing. And it's just been a fantastic thing. In the first couple of years, like every year you double your growth and just keep taking it like that. And that's how I got my start in the roofing business.
So it's interesting. You made 2 life decisions, and we like to focus on this in the podcast, how people kind of came to these big pivots in life, right? And how they thought through them. So I think the first one is, I'm leaving school. So education was obviously valued in your family, and you knew it wasn't for you. How did you think about that decision first? And then I have a second question to follow up on that.
That was, I got a lot of pushback from my father. He's very upset. He was upset with me because I was in a construction, and maybe, a little bit of ignorance on his behalf to look down on people that work like that. I thought, I really enjoyed it. I respected the guys I work with. I learned a lot. I learned teamwork. I was in sports my whole life too. So I learned teamwork from there, and discipline certainly from that, and discipline from working on a job. But, I always saw, I'd always had a knack to see the big picture, before many others can. So I enjoyed it. And my decision to move on to my own was, I got a budget put together. I knew my expenses. I was renting a little house, and I had a truck payment and those kind of things. All along, I was doing side work. So I was accumulating a little bit of tools. But I said, if I could do one residential roof every 2 weeks, I could get by. So I started there, and then it just kept growing. But yeah, the decision, I don't know. I just went with my gut. I knew what to do. It got pushed back, but I kind of ignored it. And this is my life. This is what I want to do. So,
yeah. So you are developing that business literally from scratch. Is that a fair statement?
Mike, it is absolutely from scratch. You get some rumors and people say you got a head start somewhere, or some people backed you. That's absolutely all untrue. I don't have any partners, never did. I've never taken anything. I'm cut from a different cloth. I'm hardcore. My first trucks were garbage. I used to push them down a hill and catch them in gear. And I literally worked till I had blood coming out of my fingernails. To this day, my back is destroyed. My knees crack out of the sockets and everything else. And that's all okay, because I chose to do that. And it's all how you work. It's you want to work hard. I was a hard worker. There's no doubt about it. It's just the way I like to be. And I like to do things. So I'm very, very meticulous as well.
So how did you build that business in terms of those first customers, getting them in the door and getting that first sort of revenue stream built out? Because I think for a lot of listeners and people maybe who are thinking about starting a business, taking that leap from, comfort working for another company to, okay, the mortgage is due next month is very intimidating. So how did you start with that first job? Like you said, you knew you had to if I get something every 2 weeks, I'll be okay. How did you get that rolling where then it kind of becomes a well-oiled machine over time? Because those first few, that can be pretty scary.
Yeah, it definitely is. But, you have to have confidence in yourself. You have to believe in yourself. Always stay positive. If you're negative, you're gonna attract negative things. If you're positive, you'll certainly attract positive things. And I always believe in that. You can manifest positive things. I never had a doubt. The biggest problem is always money. How do you go and start a big job when you can't buy material? You don't have that credit built up yet with your suppliers. I say Erie Materials down in Scranton, and even Robert Newman's a great man. He's the CEO of it. This guy started off with a station wagon with nothing. And the guy is just a fantastic, wonderful person. Erie gave me credit immediately and a couple other guys and different suppliers, but small. I remember my first credit limit was $5,000 with Erie. And that's, to start there, I still have the paperwork actually when I got approved.
Do you really?
But
that's great.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. And there's a good story about Erie too when I did the roof on Shops at Montage when it was built. But I think just believe in yourself. And I was a commercial roofer, but I also knew how to do residential roofing. So I wanted so badly to get into the commercial work, but it was hard for somebody to call me up and give me a shot at it. So what I did, I went out to all the local general contractors. I introduced myself. I was always good in front of people, always honest. And when you talk the talk and the lingo in construction, which I did know, it gets a little bit easier, but still you're the new guy and you have to prove yourself. And a lot of proving yourself is not always being just a low bidder. You got to be kind of real low sometimes, but I didn't have the overhead. So I was able to kind of work my way in. And I remember a couple of jobs I did. The first bigger ones was, the Mauchunk train station in Jim Thorpe.
Oh, wow.
I actually did that. That was one of my biggest jobs. And then moving on when the Shops at Montage came out to bid. Now it was probably something way bigger than I should have been looking at. Mm-hmm. But again, the confidence in myself, I knew I could do it. At the time, I needed some more equipment. I needed a little bit more credit and I needed some more manpower. But now at this point, I was just bidding it. So I just bought a house actually. I don't know if it was probably around 2004 or 5, somewhere in there. It's quite a while ago, up in Roaring Brook, and graduated from North Pocono. I just got the house. I didn't even have furniture in it. And I remember I had all the blueprints laid out for the Shops at Montage. I taught myself how to bid too. I made up all my own formulas just by what I would do in the field and how long it would take me to do different things. So I'm doing these takeoffs on my hands and knees on the floor with the blueprints. And I was going back and forth with the developer and the general contractor, which was Duke out of Cincinnati, Ohio, which was a very, very big and creditworthy company. And so conversations back and forth, the guy keeps calling me. So I had a good feeling about it. And I remember I was pulling off of Kaiser Avenue in a Kaiser Oak shopping center one day. And the guy from Duke Construction called me. It was a Friday, right around 5:30. I picked up the phone. I knew the 513 area code. So I was kind of excited. It could have been yes or no at that point, but he goes, John, we're looking at your number again. He goes, this was it's called a ballasted roof system. So you have to put rock on top of the rubber. So you use conveyors and all different kinds of things. He goes, you have conveyors? And he said, yeah, I have 3 of them. I didn't have any. He goes, a couple other things. You got the manpower. I said, yep, I have it. I'm good. I knew I could do the roof though. The roof was simple. It was just getting to the point. So he goes, all right. He goes, we're going to move ahead. We're going to get a contract out to you in the mail. And I was like almost speechless at that time. It was probably a $3 million job. It was just, it kind of set me apart. So, and then you go to the next thing. What's next here? I have to get credit. So I went down to Erie Materials. I'm sitting in a boardroom. I'm probably 23 years old. And I remember Mr. Newman looks at me, the president of Erie Materials, and he goes, are you going to pay me? And I said, absolutely, Mr. Newman. He goes, give him the credit. It was no joint check. There was no anything. They believed in me. And to this day, we still have a really good relationship. But you look at points in your life where things change and people believe in you. And now in this spectrum I'm at now, I do the same to people. I give people chances. If
you're on the other side of the table.
It's pretty neat, you know, but I never forget where I came from. And I never forget those people that were there for me as well. And, just the Shops at Montage that I go by and we do buildings like that all day long now, but even bigger. But I remember going up the highway and I see the thing getting built, and I'm like, what did I get myself into
project.
here? But, it's always saying, how do you eat an elephant? And it's one bite at a time. And I take things in my life like that. And people always say, how do you handle everything you have going on? You take it in and you dissect it and you take it little by little and you do a lot of little things at the same time and it works out.
Well, I think, your career arc, is in many ways sort of an investment. And you did all these little things over time, and then all of a sudden they compound into, this big win that looks like, oh, wow, he got that out of nowhere. But really, you had grinded for so long that, it's like the tip of the iceberg. You only see the top of it. And that's sort of how investing in anything works, whether it's, an investment account or your career or relationships, right? Like you got to put that time and that grinding in for it to pay off in a big way down the road.
Yeah. I remember I would be working all day, and then I would get home from work, I would shower, and then I would go out and get in my truck again and take the ladder off, go up, measure houses, just estimate jobs and things like that, and come home, type up proposals and try to follow up with people and do that stuff. It's 24/7. I mean, you put in, people say we're 40-hour weeks, which is like, I mean, you're over 100 hours a week all day long, and you just do it. But when you start getting those little pieces of success, and I'll tell you, it was hard being in business, even up to 10 years, it was still difficult, still hard. You're still growing, and in every type of business, when you're new, you don't really have a nucleus. You don't have those loyal people that are with you, which your people are everything, and in the beginning, everybody just started at the same time. But now I've been in business 20 some years, and I have a good core of people that some have been with me 20 years and 18 years and 15 years. It's like, it's a bit easier, believe it or not.
How do you think about, you mentioned a little bit at the beginning, running your first jobs as a teenager, and now the team you have in place now. How do you approach building that team? Because it, sort of that culture and making that one wrong hire can often set teams back, for years potentially. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, over the years, you have to let a lot of people go. And, one thing I taught myself is whenever I get that feeling about somebody that something just isn't right, and you try to keep seeing if it's going to work out or it's going to get better or it's going to get that. And, holding on longer than you should is a problem. And I've done that. I've been guilty of that in my life. When you feel that somebody isn't working or, or rowing the boat in the same direction as you need to cut ties as soon as you can. And then moving forward with it, I have to interview somebody. I have to get a good feeling about them. I some good energy from them and stuff like that. They have to be able to jive. You meet some people and it's just, you immediately like them and you could connect with them, and some you can't so much. And if you have any inkling of that in the beginning, you just don't hire them. And I've taught myself to hire the best people there is, and you pay people well. And you give them upside. You don't lock them into a ceiling. So if you do this, you do that, you could grow within the company. And I think people that work for me now see that. They're like, there's no limit with me. And there's always different things happening. It's exciting. And I always tell my guys, even with the roofing company, I said, do everything perfectly. If we have a problem, you fix it. I remember one time we even had a job and the guys put the shingles, they're a little bit crooked, no problems. It wasn't leaking or anything like that. I made them rip the whole roof off the house because it wasn't perfect. It was good. It wasn't perfect. And I want that. But when you drive in our trucks, you're proud. You're not embarrassed.
Right.
And you eat in our restaurants, you're proud. The food is good, or you work there. That's just the way I want. And to be able to do that, you need to surround yourself with the best people.
The one thing that what you said reminded me of a boss I had, younger, coming up. And he said, if you have a problem and you don't tell me, it's your problem. If you tell me, then it's our problem. So don't hide anything, right? It's like you need to have that open communication and trust, because mistakes are going to happen, but you got to be able to be comfortable with that and fix them, right?
No, sure, Mike. And you have these guys sometimes come in with, nothing but problems all the time. And that's okay, because I always say the buck stops with me. I need to be the guy that needs to pull the trigger immediately and figure it out. And I'm pretty good at that. But you always like a person that'll come in, that'll say, hey, John, we have this issue. Not really sure how to solve it, but I think this might be an option. And that's always good. Present a solution with the problem. If somebody could do that, they're
so
just
true.
even better.
That's so true. So I think it's fair to say, going back to kind of this timeline, that Shops at Montage project, sort of put you at a different level, where not only was it the size of the job, but now, you had the confidence to say you could do it. You did it. That puts you at a different level for yourself as well as for others in the industry. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, certainly, Mike. You're on the map at that point. You use that to sell now. You could say, we did a project this size, and you start putting on your bigger projects and your project profile. And then you start hunting for bigger customers, and you start making marketing brochures, and you have a little bit extra money to do that. And then maybe you're able to hire a firm, and maybe you could get a bigger ad. And we had the phone book at that time. I remember that was my biggest expense every year. I would sit down with the phone book and Dunkin' Donuts on Music Street. And I was like, oh man, $400 a month or $500 a month, but you had to do it or you don't exist. It's just, it was a different age. But,
so moving on, you spend all this time in the roofing industry. You said you had known in many ways this was kind of a gateway to other things, to bigger things maybe. And so I want to spend time at this next inflection point for you, because I could certainly argue it was an inflection point for the area, for the downtown. So can you tell the story about that process of buying the Steamtown Mall, why you did it, and sort of how the whole thing went down?
Yeah. So Mike, I'll even start a little bit before that. As I'm doing these roofing projects everywhere, you're doing warehousing, you're doing churches, you're doing, people that are converting stuff into apartments and things. And I remember specifically downtown, I was working on a job that it was an old building, was being turned into apartments. And I'm up on the roof, I'm filthy dirty from head to toe. And I see the owner of the building walking potential tenants into the building. And, he said, come here, I'll show you what we did. And it was really neat. And I'm like, wow, this is cool. And I fell in love with it. And I saw an opportunity for me and something that I really like to do. I had a good vision always. And in 2006, I started my real estate company, which was JBAS Realty. And I remember one of my first purchases was a little house down on Mineral Avenue. I actually still own it. I have one of my longtime employees is buying it. And I'm basically the bank from, he's a great guy. But another purchase right after that was I had a warehouse up in Moscow where I moved Eastern Roofing into, but it was a building that I bought that could be converted into apartments later on when I outgrew it, which we did. But I fell in love with it and I started doing stuff and, it was basically building ourselves and I started hiring some carpenters and stuff like that. And that was in, like I said, 2006 and that just kept growing. We got a couple projects going on and we were renting them out quick. And it was that concept with just a nicer building with some amenities, some outside seating areas, little fitness area in it. And that, the guys developing those kind of things downtown, it came a long way and they're getting nicer and nicer and better and better. So it's really cool, but that's how I got started into it. And I'm sitting back and I always say there are no coincidences in life. And I always say, well, what reason was I born in this area? And what is my ultimate purpose? And I was sitting back and I was just hearing people, knocking the downtown. I bought Steamtown in 2015, but before that, I could even go back and look at articles in the newspaper and stuff on TV. It was all negative, and it was really starting to get under my skin. And it's something that was out of my control. Just there was a calling for me, and I said, "Let me go look at this building." When Steamtown came up for auction, and I hadn't been in there in years, and I walked through and I'm like, "Wow!" I said, "The core and the shell are in really good condition." Some of the I don't like signage everywhere and that kind of junk, but that could all be fixed.
Sure.
But, it felt dead when I was in there, but the building was good. The bones were good. I remember the day of the auction. I woke up around 5:00 in the morning and I went in. I had no intention on bidding on it, but I went down and I think it was auction.com at the time. And I went on and I just said, let me log in and let me put my credentials in. And you had to get approved to bid. It's about like 8:00 in the morning. I was approved. And whenever the auction started, I think it was around noon. I said, what the heck? And I take a shot at it. Still didn't really, I was kind of just messing around at that point. And I'm a competitive guy. There's no doubt about it. So it would go up a little bit. I bid again. And then, it went on for about an hour. And I think the increments in the beginning were like 250,000. I think it started off like at 800 or $1 million or something. So I was in my comfort zone for sure. And I kept bidding. And then, after a while it was going up and the increments would get smaller. And then the bidding time elapsed. But every time somebody bid within 3 minutes of the time that was allotted, it would kick in another 3 minutes. So that went on for a while. I remember the last 4 or 5 times I bid, it would get down to 10 seconds. And I would bid and then somebody else would bid. So I'm like, I said, what the hell? I said, one more time. And I did it and it went down, 5, 4, 3, 2, I'm waiting for somebody to throw a thing. 1, 0. And I just sat back. I got this cold feeling over my whole body.
Now, are you alone in the room or you have any of your team there?
A good friend of mine from childhood, Pat, is with me and he still works for me now and he does a lot of my accounting.
Okay.
I'm at my computer and he's leaning against the back table in there and I'm just sitting there and nothing happened. It's just calculating results. So I said, Pat, I don't know if was it us or, and he's just looking and then it pops up on the screen and it goes, congratulations, you won the auction. I said, I mark you out that. I said, oh shit. Right. he goes, you just bought this team. Tell me. I go, shut up, man. Oh my God. So the way that worked,
wow,
Mike, was
what a story that is.
And that's just how it happened. And like I said, if something's meant to be, it's meant to be. And you just have to trust that. So, I sat there for a couple minutes and I'm like, what did I just do? And I said, okay, now we got to get it done. But part of the agreement when you win the auction is, it was $5,250,000. And the next day within 24 hours, you have to wire over 10% non-refundable. So there's $500,000 I had to send out for that. And I had 30 days to close. Now, a lot of paperwork, a lot of leases you have to go through, a lot of estoppels and a lot of different things. Now you're looking at taxes that are, close to $1 million a year, an electric bill that's $70,000 a month, and you have a poor rent roll. So finally, after 30 long days, and nobody knew it was me. I was the last guy anybody thought of. I don't even think I was in the ring for a while till maybe the last week. And a couple of people started saying, who bought them all? Who bought them all? I said, I don't know. I have no idea. I didn't want to tell anybody because in case I didn't get financed, not only would I be out a lot of money,
sign the contract.
Yeah. Not only would I be out a lot of money, I couldn't get back. I'd be embarrassed. So, with having good strength in my other companies and, signing my life away and being to a point where, at a bank loan, you have a lot of covenants and I had tons of them on me. I was handcuffed. Basically, but I said, this is what I have to do to grow. This is taking a big risk and doing that kind of thing. And, I got it done. I got the approval and we moved forward. And it was like that instant I went and signed all the paperwork and it was probably about a foot high of papers I had to sign. When it got recorded, I got phone calls from everywhere. And I called a good friend of mine that was involved in some public things. And I said, what do I do here? Because you went from kind of a relatively unknown guy into almost a public figure and overnight. And so I had to get a PR guy and I had to do all that kind of stuff. So that next day,
but you love doing that. So that was good.
I was, yeah, I always like to stay low key as much as I can. However, for the purpose of spreading positivity to people and to try to promote our area, I think some of this needs to be done. But overnight, I remember the next day I'm in my office and WNEP's pulling in and WBRE's pulling in and Scranton Times is calling me. And I was just like, don't talk to anybody. Don't do this. Don't get on camera. I didn't really know. But it was neat. And
it's a whole new world at that point.
It's a whole new world. And I remember one of the guys, I did the old specialty records down in Alf and I changed over apartments. And one of the guys from the Alphen Borough had said, this guy, they were interviewing everybody. So this guy came down and said he was going to do, and he did every bit of it. And it was just nice. And then people were up at the Old Brook up in Moscow, one of my restaurants. And I said, no, the food's good. It's a solid place. It was just nice. I had a lot of good stuff. I remember one of my bankers that I'd used, he called me up on the phone. I thought I was going to get like a congratulations. And he said, I won't mention his name, but I love him. He's a good guy. He said, John, I said, hey, what's going on? He goes, what the hell did you do? So Mike, I could tell you, I was ostracized from every banking institution. People were like, you just sunk. What did you do? Why would you buy that? It was foreclosed, sheriff's sale, mess, negative press all over the place. Yep. And and that was 2015. I was 36 years old, and it was hard. And I bought it, and I had a management company in there, and I was pushing the management company pretty hard. I said, what could we do here to make a change? What could we do as a catalyst? I wanted something immediate. I wanted to get in there and make a difference right away.
Just get that quick win.
That's right.
Almost to kind of throw the finger at the people with the negative narrative that had been so prevalent.
No doubt. And it's like, and I talked to him, I said, what's this movie theater sitting here? He goes, we have an operator for it. So why didn't you ever do anything with that? He goes, well, you have to go to digital screens and reclining chairs and to make a difference. I knew having a Cinemark and a Regal in the area, how could you differentiate yourself from that? So I ended up doing that. And I built that out basically for a company that didn't work out. And I'll get back to the movie theater in a minute and my plans for it. But Crunch Fitness, I was able to convince Crunch Fitness to give us the territory down here. And Crunch Fitness, I had a guy from Jersey that was helping me get the franchise and put that together. And then he was like managing percentage. I ended up buying him out. So I do own Crunch Fitness 100%, which became hugely popular. But I knew that getting some of those things in there were important to get people interested in it again. Starbucks at that point, first when I bought it, all these people they wanted to lower their rent and they wanted to move out. And I had to settle all that kind of stuff. And Starbucks was leaving, and I convinced them to stay even for a year and with no rent until I could convince them I could get the foot traffic up. It was a difficult lift. And every time somebody moved out of the center, it was in the newspaper, somebody's leaving and this and that. Yeah. And then, your banks are looking at that and your banks are getting nervous, and you got to keep those guys happy all the time. But it just started, I'd say Luzerne County Community College comes in, and then, Delta Medics, huge, Delta Medics came down there, believed in us, and it just started going. And we secured Crunch, and then had the theater opening up, and, many others, just, really, really good people. That place is hugely successful now. It went from a detriment to me where people were looking at me from a lending perspective to something that just shows so much strength. It's been great. And I think at that point, people see the city and the downtown differently now than they did back in 2015. And we brought, even having Geising there, we brought doctors to the downtown for the first time in Delta now, which is Lehigh Valley, having Lehigh Valley in the same building and in our downtown, getting the Social Security Administration, Bee's Backyard, the aquarium. And I said, the aquarium is so successful.
Yeah. I just took my daughter there a couple of weeks ago. She loved it.
And Cliff, the guy that owns a super guy, he's a hard worker. He's kind of like me. He's a blue collar guy, and he just gets it done. No nonsense. He's just a good guy. So many good people there. How
did you, not to interrupt, but so the list of entities that you just mentioned, who were in what was a traditional retail space, how did that reinvention or sort of opening it up to that non-traditional tenant, how did you think about that? Because that's interesting for this this project in particular, but also broadly, there's a lot of retail space, and obviously, the retail industry is changing. So how did you and your team think through that repurposing of what was a place with good bones, a good location, parking, but maybe not viewed the way what you created ended up looking like?
Yeah. So in life, you find out where you work your best from. And mine is when I'm backed into a corner and there's no other choice. That's when you have to fight. That's when you have to reinvent and change things. So I was saying before, when I bought the center, there was a management company in there and they were going nowhere. They weren't doing anything. And then, I actually met with Al Basalyga, who's a great guy, and went down, and they've been a huge part of our success as well. They're dedicated. They do great down there. They're good people. But he had introduced me to another management company, which I had for a little while. And, I was excited again. These guys seemed like they were going to push and do different things, but I wasn't getting anything from them. And like I said before, you can't hang on long to somebody where you don't feel like you guys are working the same way. So I ended up firing them as well. And I said, I'm going to manage this myself because I kind of like to be in control of that. And at that point, it started changing. And at that point, I removed the stigma of mall, which I think was a negative stigma, and I changed it to the marketplace at Steamtown. We kind of reinvented it in here with basically no money, and the thing was bleeding, which I expected to a certain point. But now we have to do a little bit of a marketing campaign and start getting people interested in that. But that's why I did it. And people always say we missed the retail portion of the mall. And don't think for a second I didn't call thousands and thousands of people. And
I'm sure it wasn't the first option.
I didn't give up easy. And I went after everybody. And I even said to them, free rent. I don't want any rent, these bigger national chains. And you do what's called a breakpoint lease. So if they hit a number that's even better than their expectations, they'll pay a percentage of that. So basically I'm giving them space for nothing. And even at that point, they wouldn't come. And you got to understand, Scranton is a B market. So a lot of these companies want to go in A markets. I had a local architectural firm put together a whole brochure and stuff for that for Trader Joe's because I think downtown needed a marketplace. And I told Trader Joe's, come in here, I'll build it out. I'll even work in the produce department. I think I told them, and they still weren't interested. So I did try it.
They didn't take that offer.
They didn't take that, So it was good. I learned a lot from it, and that's just the way it goes. So things change, but I knew I had to make a big change, and I said, why not have a marketplace where many different types of things. The thing with that center is foot traffic. And I look back and I research, how did the mall fail? When the mall opened, the Globe was the third tenant, or the third anchor rather. They closed down. So you had dual anchor tenants with Boscov's and Montgomery Ward. And what that does, Mike, is you have all these inlines in between them. So the cross traffic between the dual anchors services all those inlines. So when one of those anchors dies, those inlines die. And also in their leases, many of these guys had an out in the lease because we were required to keep a double anchor building. So that's when it started falling apart.
So then the dominoes start falling quick when the double anchor sort of model falls apart.
That's right. Yeah, that's definitely right. So putting back some medical anchors in there, it's all about foot traffic. It doesn't matter if you're selling shirts or if you're doing medical treatments. It's bodies in the building.
Yeah, it's having a real anchor, whether it's a Delta Medics or Montgomery Ward.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And because of that now, we have 26 check-ins a month at Crunch. Starbucks is doing the best numbers they've ever done in their life. And some of these smaller tenants in there, like I created the public market upstairs in the old food court.
Yeah.
And I thought of it like an incubator, and it is probably like 40 or 50 spots. So I said, if I get 40 or 50 tenants here, they're one huge tenant. And it was doing good. And then we got hit with the COVID thing and it kind of broke apart a little bit like that. But I saw some of those people that started off and they're actually opening up brick and mortar stores, which is great. And I always tell them, you could leave, but just open up something in Scranton somewhere, So I'm all for Scranton.
Yeah. That timing of the, for the smaller vendors, obviously with 2020 and everything that came with it was tough, but because you have the anchors, and the aquarium and all these other things, that's probably the easier part to come back for you than trying to get another anchor in, right?
Yeah, we had to take every relationship we had, sit down with them and figure it out because that was a crazy time. And we did. We worked out what was best for our tenants, our partners, and what was best for us. And it all worked out pretty good. Tough times.
So for that project, before moving on to some of the other projects and sort of bigger picture, what do you see for the marketplace moving forward? This sort of multi-purpose, you can go to the doctors, get lunch. What do you see for that and for the area downtown?
Well, I didn't think I'd ever say it, but we're ready to start Geisinger Phase 2 under orthopedics, which is another 45,000 square feet.
Wow.
The Electric City dentist down there is expanding. So, and like I said, I didn't think I'd ever say this, but I don't have a ton of room left after that. So whatever we did it right and it worked. There's some temp tenants in there that fill space and they're great people, but those are people you can move around if you get somebody else. So there's stuff we could work with a little bit. Crunch is doing a big expansion now in the back. Yeah. We're adding some heavier weights and we're adding a kind of a protein juice bar concept to it and just updating it. just based on its success. Over across the street, the movie theater, I'm waiting. I had one tenant in there, and then I didn't like the way they were operating. And then we had another tenant in there, and they couldn't hold it together. After that, similar, like I did with the mall, I took over management. We created the art house, and I remember Frozen 2 came out, and we had characters dressed up, and we were doing all that kind of stuff. I had one of my chefs from one of my restaurants come down. He was making really good food. We were servicing all 8 theaters at the time. And you got to remember too, when you're a little theater like that, you got Big Cinemark, you got Big Regal, they kind of tell the movie
they're
people,
squeezing.
Yeah, they're squeezing. You don't want to give you first run on certain things and stuff like that, but whatever. I'm a fighter, you get through it. But when COVID hit, it was getting better every week, the theater, and people were starting to get into it. And it was before I had the Electric City garage fixed up too, which is all redone and nice now. So as soon as I feel that there's good product coming from, Hollywood or any place, I don't know what's going on in Hollywood, but
we'll save that for your next visit to the podcast.
Right. I'll keep my mouth shut on that. But I would love to reopen it, and it's turnkey. It would be ready to go. So I'm just waiting for the right time.
So, pivoting from there, and that it's such a great story that I think people are going to love listening to. To be in the room, for that type of deal is so interesting. Certainly to me. So moving on to some other topics I wanted to hit on. I think you've spoken to this positive mindset, avoiding kind of that negative energy coming from other people, and how important that is kind of to maintain day to day. And when you do that, sort of paraphrasing your words, good things tend to happen. Whether you need that break, you need that person from Erie to give you the credit. Those good things happen when you maintain that sort of mindset. So how, what are the habits, maybe routine that you have to help do that? And because it's not easy, day to day with sort of everything life can throw at you, particularly these last few years for people. To maintain that positive approach where it doesn't sound like that kind of cliche.
Yes, I think one of the things we're able to control in this world, Mike, are our thoughts. And I tell people the second that you start having a negative thought in your head, change it. It's as simple as that. And one of the things you have to do is to start on this path is just kind of forgive yourself and then start forgiving others. And forgiving isn't always forgetting, but you have to break free from the chains and all that kind of stuff. So if your day starts and things are going the wrong way and stuff like that, just look at the good parts of it, as hard as that is. But once you start flipping that in your head and the good things start happening, and I'm living proof of it. And it's hard to explain to somebody because it seems so simple. And sometimes the simplest things are the best things.
Yeah. Well, and simple is not easy, as I like to say with investing.
So true.
Right? Owning a good company and holding it for 30 years sounds simple, but that's not easy when the market's down 25% in the first 6 months of the year, right?
You make adjustments. You go into survival mode. You don't give up. I never, ever, ever give up. And that's just one thing I do. But, before I go to bed at night, right when you're starting to get sleepy, you think positive thoughts. And right when you wake up in the morning, when you're kind of still a little bit hazy, you think positive thoughts. It sets your whole day right.
And I think the science is backs that up based on sort of the things that I've done and read. But you're right. It's kind of creating a habit of positive thinking, just like going to the gym is a habit, right?
Sure. Everybody has those people that, when you see their name come up on your phone, you're like, get away from those people. Cut them out of your life. You don't need them. And you find your group that you really enjoy being around, and it makes you feel good, and nurture those relationships more and cut the negative stuff out of your life, and your life will change.
So one of I think the biggest obstacle for many people to that point can often be listening to what the doubters, quote unquote, may say about your ideas, and I think this is something I struggled with particularly when I was younger, but even today, caring what other people might think of you. And maybe it's even people you don't know, or maybe it's people in your house, right? But that creates that fear of failure. So talk a little bit more about how you've dealt with that, because there's been no shortage of it, for not only the mall project, but a lot of the things that you've done and continue to do.
Yeah. It's like the news. You might like certain people like certain channels and not other channels, but I think it's important to look at everything, and you get a good analysis of what's out there, right? So I look at the positive, and I look at what people say that's negative about me. And you try to see, what their concerns are and stuff. And some is just nonsense and just who cares, but I never let that negativity slow me down. It honestly doesn't bother me. And there was a time that maybe it did a little bit, but the supporters are way more than the doubters. And I always look at it like this. My intentions are always good for everything. I don't have any ulterior motives. I've never gotten any grant money. I've never done any of that stuff. I'm not in the political circles. I'm not, maybe that's sometimes why you get attacked a little bit. I don't care about that stuff. It's not important to me. I like people that do things. I like people that do positive things, and I want to be one of them. And I live here. I have 2 little girls that live here, and why wouldn't we want the best for our area? And to fix this area, you go for the core problem. And if Scranton is our core and Scranton is our city and our nucleus, once that's fixed and working right, I think, all the other surrounding areas that depend on Scranton as our epicenter work.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the engine, both economically, but also culturally. And if that's not vibrant, it can't sort of mushroom and spread out.
Sure. It's frustrating sometimes to see some of, the policies and things like that. And, but I always took it like as a 3-phase solution, and phase 1 is getting bodies downtown, getting people to live downtown, just like the mall, foot traffic. And that's happening, and it's been successful. And not just myself, there's a lot of people doing it and pushing, and a lot of people on our team. We have a lot more people living downtown than we've had in a long time, or maybe ever. And then phase 2 of that is once you have a successful phase 1, you start seeing little shops opening up. You start seeing, the hair salons, the clothing stores, restaurants even. I'm working on one downtown right now. And in phase 3, once that phase 1 and phase 2 are in motion, you start seeing some bigger companies, some anchors. A lot could be told from the story of the mall to a whole, looking at it downtown. And you see that. You see Fidelity Bank now putting their headquarters down, putting a big commitment, and I think it's awesome. I think it's really, really good. And that's happening. So from that perspective, we're growing, and I'm, boots on the ground and seeing it every day. And then, I just opened up the Far Street Tavern in West Side, and the people are coming in there, they're excited about Scranton again a little bit. We give them some hope. And I think it's important to keep that going.
So the, that lends to a question I had, which was, I think the concept of having a vision, I think is really important no matter what we're talking about in life. It certainly is in my world. If you don't have goals that you're trying to accomplish, you're kind of just shooting from the hip. It's hard to plan. It's hard to have a disciplined process because you don't really know what you're aiming for. So talk about that concept of vision and how that's been important to your success.
Yeah, Mike, so I'm a very calculated guy. Oftentimes I'll say things that, will make sense many, many months down the road. And I tell the people that work for me that too. It's like chess. You have to be 10 steps ahead. And I've always been fortunate to have a great vision and do things. And when I initially started off, I was young, and you want to be the biggest roofer, you want to be the biggest real estate guy, you want to be the biggest that and the best. And that's all ego. And, a couple of years ago, I shed my ego. It doesn't matter to me anymore. I look at projects more as how they can support the community and how they can help other businesses and people and just improve the quality of life here, and even improve people's mood and how they look at things. And when I get a tenant downtown or bring somebody in, it's not taking the tenant from somebody else's building downtown and putting in my building. And to me, that's not a win. That's a lateral move. When you get somebody that's never had a presence in the downtown and you bring them in and they're a new part of that business culture, that's a true win. And that's a win for everybody, even your competitors. I don't look at competitors the same way I used to, and they're all trying to survive too. I'd rather work with them than fight with them. But, I think that's a big difference. How could you help others and do what you do? And it's not always all about money. Of course, you need to be successful to keep going, but now that has been diminished with me a bit, how I look at things. And
so that ego concept is interesting and something I've explored and spoken even with other guests about on the show. But so you said you kind of had to shed that to take that next step. Talk about that.
Yeah, I think in society, everything that's put up against us, I think we're indoctrinated to have that and to think. You watch social media and stuff and you see these people and this unrealistic life that's probably all falsified to begin with. And you think that's success, right? Well, it really isn't. What success is to have friends and have a great family and have a great community that, you enjoy being around. And that to me is success. Not that other that's garbage. So, but they're trained. So they put that into us to think that's the normal way and probably on purpose to keep you.
Yeah, it's noise.
Held back. Yeah,
it's noise. Those limiting, those people coming in to work for you, and even in your own first jobs, like you never really wanted that ceiling, which is part of what that does, because you're kind of, you're running somebody else's race versus running your own race.
Yeah, and you never have a chance to sit back and enjoy anything. You get successful. You're like, I want more. I want more. I want more. It's just you're chasing your whole
hamster
life
on the wheel,
right? You're either chasing or you're sitting back waiting, and neither one are really good.
So talk about to wrap up the last part of this conversation, which has been so great. Your vision for the projects you currently have in the pipeline, some of which have gotten a little bit of press. I know Tanks is one that I have my eye on. Personally,
I took your cages out, Mike. They're in the dumpster.
I walked into that one.
Yeah, a little bit. I apologize for
No, that was very good. I was hoping to get one maybe for the backyard, but maybe I could find one online or something. But that next phase that you spoke of, can you tell listeners a little bit more about some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we just finished up the Far Street Tavern, really cool project in Trips Park, and it's just going in there and seeing how happy people are. They've been broken up for years with the COVID, and I'll call it the COVID thing.
I talked to a couple of people who I know from West Scranton, and who have been there recently, and it just, we're raving about it. Not only the atmosphere, but the food and even the staff and everything. So,
thank you, Mike. And it's great to hear, but seeing people that haven't seen each other in maybe years sometimes, and their neighbors and stuff, it's just awesome. You look back and you say, I created that. And I took a building that should have been knocked down and really, I should never had that building. It came from a weird way. I was buying a liquor license and I ended up buying the building, but no coincidences, right? So getting that done. So far is done. I'm working right now in the old Prody Cigar building, which is going to be 41 residential units.
That's such a great old building. That's so much character. Yeah,
it's going to be, what's more important even than that, it's on a gateway coming into the downtown. So you're going by this dilapidated building for years and years, and it's just, it was somebody that's not from here, it's the first impression you get that. And
yeah.
It's going to be unbelievable. I did the giant carpet building coming in from the other side from 81, and now it's all lit up at night. It's beautiful. So you get kind of coming to the city there. You get a good feeling when you see a nice product.
Definitely.
And you get the same way coming off of that. Tinks, which is 519 Linden Street. We're probably going to call it the 519. It's a 3-story building with a big basement. Probably do the 2 upper floors with apartments. And then the main floor would do like a restaurant bar, really nice with outside seating, really recreate the look of the building and get rid of that fire engine red paint off of it. And then the basement's going to be a music hall.
Wow.
And my father was, actually a musician, and he was an accordion player. Kind of ages him a little bit, but, so he played, did the original Fiddler on the Roof on Broadway in Dear World. And
wow.
And he was actually at one time, he was won an award for the best accordion player in the world, even.
Really?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So I'm going to do a little bit like that music hall, like a tribute to him. He passed in 2010.
That's very cool.
But it's going to be a nice place, classy. I don't want to ever be tied to a club, that type thing. But
right.
Now having a music hall, and my thoughts were, people go out to have a nice dinner, and instead of leaving the downtown and going to wherever, they stay here. So it's going to be really good, really classy. I think it's going to change the downtown scene a little bit. It's phase 2 stuff.
That doesn't really exist at the moment. There's plenty of good places to go out, have a drink, certainly places to eat, but that combination doesn't exist in that form today.
It's been gone a long time. And I think having that music hall the way it is, have live entertainment, they used to have bands and stuff like that, but it's been a long time since we've really had that. So bringing that back to the downtown is great. Hopefully at some point get the theater back open. And you get into the old Red Carpet Inn property that I bought. The building's been demolished, of course. And right now we're in the design phase. So we have a hotel, a major hotel that we have approval to put on a site. So basically I'm doing my due diligence on that agreement. It's a 20-year agreement. So I want to make sure it's perfect. I want to make sure it works. I want to make sure it's viable. Along with that, we're going to have residential units, probably about 200 units, and, a convention space and retail space and some professional space at the top of that.
Wow.
And, my goal, and it'll be the tallest building ever built down here for sure. And, at least 17 stories, maybe taller. You got to look at the economies of scale when you build something. It might be some type of construction where if you go a little bit taller, you can get into a different build, and you might even be able to save a little money per floor. So I have to look at all those different things. But next step with that, we have to choose an architectural firm, which I know which one we're going to pick. I'm just waiting to rip apart the lease deal with the hotel group, and then get them started, hire a construction manager, and start figuring it out and get the core and shell going. So that's a major, major project. Yeah.
Is that the biggest you would ever done from scratch, at least?
Yeah. The budget on that's probably between, $110, $120 million. So by far. But I have to make sure it works. I don't want to build something and stop midway. So a lot of time needs to be done into it. And people say, what's going on with it? It's moving forward. We have meetings about it, weekly and stuff. So it will happen.
Doing things right takes time.
It does. It does. I don't want to mess that one up. That one could knock me out. So
yeah, we'll make sure we get that one right.
Sure. Absolutely. A lot of stuff going down on the marketplace. It's, Geisinger, like I said, we're getting ready to start phase 2, Crunch Fitness with some, renovations and a new juice bar and stuff like that. The dentist down there, they've been so successful moving into the mall. It's been great. They're adding on a big piece, and there's a lot of different interested parties and stuff like that. I have a couple other apartment projects going on. The old Pascalicchio buildings, which I own. Now we've put lawyers in the front part of it, and we're going to do apartments in the rest of it. So the building
that's another great building.
Yeah, it's super building. Sad to see those guys leave the downtown, but they needed more space. But they're great people, and I showed them what we did with it. They're happy. The building didn't get knocked down. It'll be there forever.
There's a lot of history there.
Totally. Yes, a lot of good stuff. I have about 6 properties under contract in the downtown, right around that area. The old restaurant supply building, the Swift building down by Tom Hester Chevrolet. We're getting ready to go on that. That's going to be 35 units. I have the old YMCA down in Williamsport. We're getting ready to start that as well within the next week or two. That's going to be, I think, 38 units.
So you think the amount of sort of city living continues in this current sort of trajectory with people wanting to have, and I'm very familiar with it from New York and Philly. I lived in those types of places where it had the amenities, had the location. So you think that trend continues in the years to come?
Yeah. And Mike, even gets stronger because you're seeing, not only the amenities within the building where the apartments are in, but the downtown's starting to build amenities as well. Mm-hmm. And it just, the downtown has a totally different vibe, and a credit to our police and fire. I mean, these guys are great. It's safe.
Yeah. It's so important.
It's awesome.
It's so important.
Tip my hat to those guys. It's just, they do a great job. I don't feel ever anything walking around downtown at any time.
No, you're right. And you almost don't even think about, I'm down there, every day. And that hasn't even crossed my mind, which is you can't, that's got to be table stakes, right?
Totally. And so the draw with all that different kind of stuff, every time you open up a shop or a restaurant and things like that, why wouldn't you want to be downtown? You see people moving around more at night. I actually said, if I had the Far Street Tavern, how the whole thing opens up and stuff, and to move that downtown, there's really nothing like that. There will be at 519 at the old Tinks, but just there's so much potential that we have here. And that's why it does bother me a little bit when people are negative about it. So what good does that do?
Mm-hmm. Jill Murray, who's the president at Lackawanna, had a line. She actually wrote an op-ed, which is how I got to meet her, where she said, it's time to shed the inferiority complex in this area. And there's it's an interesting conversation about where that comes from. But the projects that you and so many others are doing, and the businesses sort of, planting roots into the ground downtown, it starts there for that change, I think.
No, I agree, Mike. And I don't know why people, it's time we stop, selling for mediocrity and thinking this is just good enough. And great people built great cities, and we have great people here. Why not build our city great? I have no interest in moving anywhere. I'm here for a purpose, and I like it. But this is our team. This is our home team. Why beat up on it? Help it. And if you can't go and build a building, you could at least be positive. It helps.
Yeah. I love it. And, I think there's a lot of people who feel that way, and momentum is certainly building. And I think the best is yet to come, not only for downtown, but for the region. And, you and so many others are a big reason for that. So I have one last question for you that I've asked each guest so far. And that is, what advice, knowing everything you've done, or knowing everything you know now and everything you've experienced and done so far, but what advice would you give your 22-year-old self as you sit here today?
Ooh, that's a good question. I always did believe in myself, but over the years, and when I was younger, I had a couple doubts, but every time I had a doubt and I went against my intuition and my gut instinct, it blew up on me. So trust that, there's a reason you feel that way.
Yeah.
The universe is telling you something. So, I would say stick to your instinct and always do good, and, shed your ego a little bit faster than you did.
That's a hard process, isn't it?
It definitely is. And I don't mean ego like, you're the strongest guy stuff. It's everything, like, wanting things that don't really matter.
Yeah,
and what matters,
caring what other people think is a big part of it.
Sure. Right.
Well, thank you, John. This was just a great conversation. Look forward to having more in the future. Good luck with sort of everything you have going on. And I look forward to, and my whole team looks forward to watching it, to continue to build here downtown. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
The information on this podcast was created by Alliance Wealth Advisors and published for informational purposes only. The guest on this episode was not a client at the time of this interview and did not receive any compensation. For more information, please visit alliancewealthadvisors.com.